Welcome to Calmheal, a place where peace finds you. Have you ever felt life spinning like a relentless storm, tearing at your calm? Picture this, a man lost in a New York night, rain pounding the streets, his world crumbling fast. Then, through the chaos, he spots a faint glow, a lantern flickering in the dark. What if a 2,500-year-old wisdom could light your way too? The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." Tonight, we'll uncover how one simple truth can steady you, no matter the tempest raging outside. Let's step into the rain-soaked streets of New York, where John's story begins. He's 38, a man who once had it all, a steady job, a loving wife, a small apartment buzzing with life. But storms don't warn you before they strike, do they? In 6 months, he lost everything: the job to layoffs, the marriage to silence, the hope to endless nights alone. Now he walks these streets, collar up against the wind. The cities hum a cruel reminder of what once was. His mind races, replaying every mistake, every regret. Have you ever felt that weight, the kind that presses down until you can't breathe? John did, every step heavier than the last, rain blurring his vision. He didn't notice the little Buddhist temple at first, tucked between a deli and a laundromat, its wooden door worn but warm. A single lantern hung outside, swaying in the gale, its light steady despite the chaos. Something pulled him closer, a flicker of curiosity, or maybe desperation. He pushed the door open, stepping out of the storm into stillness. Inside, the air smelled of sandalwood, soft and grounding. A monk sat quietly, his robe a simple gray, his eyes calm like a lake at dawn. John hesitated, then spoke, his voice rough from disuse. "I don't know why I'm here," he said, "but I can't keep going like this." The monk smiled, not with pity, but with knowing. "You're carrying a storm inside," he replied, "but even the wildest winds pass. Sit, let's light a lantern for your heart." John sat, unsure but willing. The monk handed him a small candle, its flame fragile yet alive. "The Buddha taught us," the monk began, "that life is impermanent, like clouds shifting across the sky. We suffer when we cling to what fades, but peace comes when we let go." John stared at the flame, its dance hypnotic. He'd spent months clutching the wreckage of his old life, blaming himself, the world, fate. What if he stopped? "Try this," the monk said gently. "Breathe in, feel the air fill you, then breathe out, let the weight slip away." John closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, the chaos in his chest loosening just a little. "Imagine you're that lantern outside," the monk continued. "The storm rages, but your light holds steady. It's not about fixing everything. It's about finding calm within the mess." For the first time in months, John felt a crack in the darkness, small, but real. Let's pause here. Think about your own storms. Maybe it's a job that drains you, a relationship fraying at the edges, or a quiet fear that keeps you awake. The Buddha's words echo through time. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. What are you holding on to that's dimming your light? John didn't see it yet, but that night was a beginning, a seed planted in the rain-soaked soil of his life. Back in the temple, the monk shared more. "There's a story," he said, "of a man crossing a river with a heavy load. He reached the other side, but kept carrying it, too afraid to let go." The Buddha asked, "Why burden yourself when the journey's done?" John nodded, the words sinking in. His job was gone, his marriage too. Why was he still hauling their ghosts? The monk's voice softened. "Freedom isn't in the past, it's here, in this breath." John left that night with no grand answers, just a candle in his pocket and a question. Could he light his own way? The rain still fell, but it felt different, less like a punishment, more like a rhythm. He walked home, the city's noise fading into the background, his steps lighter. Over the next few days, he tried the monk's advice: 5 minutes of breathing, 5 minutes of stillness. It wasn't magic, but it was something, a tether in the storm. Think about your day, those moments when everything piles up, the emails, the bills, the endless scroll of bad news. What if you gave yourself 5 minutes, not to fix it all, but to just be? The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The present moment is the only moment available to us, and it is the door to all moments." John started there, in the now, and found the storm didn't own him anymore. This isn't about becoming a monk or leaving your life behind. It's about finding a lantern you can carry anywhere. John's story isn't over, but that night, he learned something ancient yet simple. Peace isn't out there, it's in here. So, wherever you are, take a breath with me now, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel the ground beneath you. That's your light, flickering, but alive. John woke the next morning, the candle from the temple still in his pocket. The rain had stopped, but the city outside his window buzzed with its usual chaos. Horns blaring, people rushing. He felt different though, not fixed, not whole, but lighter somehow. That 5-minute breathing trick the monk taught him lingered in his mind, a quiet anchor in the noise. He decided to try it again, sitting on his worn couch, eyes closed, air moving in, then out. It wasn't dramatic, but the storm inside him softened, just a little. Days turned into weeks, and John kept at it. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. He wasn't chasing miracles, just a moment to breathe, to be. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." John didn't know that quote then, but he was living it, step by step. The city didn't slow down. The bills still came, but he started to notice things, the way sunlight hit the pavement, the smell of coffee from a cart. One afternoon, he passed a park, kids laughing, dogs chasing leaves. He stopped, something tugging at him. He sat on a bench, watching, breathing, letting the world spin without fighting it. This is mindfulness, the monk had said back at the temple, seeing life as it is, not as you wish it to be. John realized he'd spent years running, chasing a life he thought he deserved, never stopping to see what was already there. Let's think about that for a second. How often do we miss the small stuff? The steam rising from your morning tea, the sound of rain on your roof, a stranger's fleeting smile. Zen teachings remind us, when you wash the dishes, wash the dishes. It's about being here, fully, not lost in yesterday or tomorrow. John was learning that, slowly, messily, but surely. One evening, he went back to the temple, the lantern still swaying outside. The monk was there, sweeping the steps, his movements steady, unhurried. "You're back," the monk said, not surprised, just present. John nodded, pulling the candle from his pocket. "This helped," he said, "but I don't know why." The monk chuckled softly. "It's not the candle, it's you. You're starting to see. The light was always there, buried under all that noise." They sat together, the temple quiet except for the faint hum of traffic outside. "There's a Buddhist prayer I like," the monk said. "May I be free from suffering. May I find peace." It's simple, but it's everything, isn't it? John repeated it silently. "May I be free. May I find peace." He didn't feel enlightened, but he felt human, and that was enough. The monk added, "You don't need to fix the storm, just learn to walk through it." John started carrying that prayer like a second candle, whispering it on tough days. Work was still scarce, his ex-wife's silence still stung, but he wasn't drowning anymore. He'd sit by his window, watching the city breathe, and think, maybe peace isn't a destination, maybe it's this, right now. The Buddha taught, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. John was thinking less about loss, more about what he could hold on to, breath by breath. Try this with me. Wherever you are, close your eyes for a moment. Feel your feet on the floor, your hands resting easy. Breathe in, say silently, "May I be free." Breathe out, "May I find peace." It's not about escaping life. It's about meeting it, soft and steady. John did that, day after day, and the storm didn't vanish, but it lost its grip. One night, he met a friend, Sarah, at a diner, neon lights buzzing overhead. She asked how he was, really. He paused, sipping his coffee, then said, "I'm okay, not great, but okay." She raised an eyebrow. "You seem different." He smiled, faint but real. "I found a lantern, I guess." She didn't get it, but that was fine. He wasn't explaining it for her. He was living it for himself. Think about your own lantern. What keeps your light steady when the wind picks up? Maybe it's a walk in the park, a quiet corner with a book, or just sitting still for 5 minutes. The Zen master Dogen said, "To study the self is to forget the self," and John was forgetting the old John, the one who carried every failure like a stone. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he was present, and that was a start. John started noticing the cracks in his old life, not the ones that broke it, but the ones letting light in. That diner chat with Sarah stuck with him, her raised eyebrow, his quiet smile. He wasn't used to feeling okay, not great, just okay, but it was growing on him. The city still roared outside, subways rumbling, sirens wailing. Yet he found pockets of stillness, 5 minutes by the window, 10 on a park bench. The monk's words echoed. You don't need to fix the storm, just walk through it. One morning, he dug out an old journal, dusty from years of neglect. He wrote, not much, just a line. Today, I breathed, and it was enough. It felt strange, putting pen to paper, but it grounded him, like planting a seed. The Buddha said, with our thoughts, we make the world, and John was starting to see that, how his mind had built a prison of regret, how it could build something else too, maybe a lantern, maybe a path. He went back to the temple often now, not for answers, just to sit. The monk was usually there, sweeping, brewing tea, always present. One day John asked, how do you stay so calm? The monk paused, leaning on his broom, then said, I don't fight the wind, I let it pass. It wasn't a secret formula, just a choice, and John wanted that choice too, to stop wrestling every gust, to stand steady instead. Let's think about our own winds, the ones that howl through our days, deadlines, arguments, worries piling up like leaves. Zen teachings tell us, the way is not in the sky, the way is in the heart. John was finding his way, not up there in some perfect life, but right here, in the mess of it all. He'd sit with his journal, writing small things. The rain tapped the glass today, I listened, and it felt like prayer. One afternoon, he tried something new, walking the city with no plan, just feeling it. The crowds didn't swallow him this time. He moved with them, past vendors shouting, lights flashing, a rhythm he'd once hated. Be where you are, the monk had said, and John was, fully, for once. He stopped at a bridge, the Hudson River glittering below, and breathed. In, out, the prayer surfacing. May I be free, may I find peace. That night, he met Sarah again, same diner, same buzzing lights. She asked, what's with the lantern thing? He laughed, a real laugh, rare for him. It's not a thing, he said. It's just me, trying to stay lit. She nodded, sipping her coffee. It suits you. They talked about nothing big, just life, and John realized he wasn't performing, wasn't hiding. He was there, present, human. Have you ever tried that, just being? Not fixing, not planning, just letting the moment hold you? The Buddha taught, there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. And John was walking it, not fast, not far, but forward. He'd sit by the river some days, watching boats drift, and think, this is enough, not perfect, but enough. The storm still came, bills, lonely nights, but it didn't own him anymore. One evening at the temple, the monk shared a story. A man carried a lantern through a dark forest, scared of every shadow. He kept walking, and the light grew, not because the forest changed, but because he did. John nodded, feeling that shift, how his own shadows weren't so heavy now. You're not the storm, the monk said. You're the one holding the light. Try this with me. Next time you feel the wind pick up, pause, find something small, a bird singing, a warm mug in your hands. Breathe into it, let it anchor you. John did that, day by day, and the city became less a battlefield, more a place to live. He wrote in his journal, the noise is still there, but I'm not, and smiled at how true it felt. This isn't about escaping, it's about staying, right where you are, with your lantern flickering. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh said, smile, breathe, and go slowly. And John was trying, not always succeeding, but trying. He wasn't the old John anymore, not the one lost in the rain. He was this John, still figuring it out, still lighting his way. John's days started feeling less like battles, more like waves, some high, some low, but always moving. He kept his journal close now, scribbling thoughts between sips of coffee. The subway rattled today. I didn't mind. It wasn't happiness exactly, not the loud kind, just a quiet steadiness, a lantern glow in the gray. The monk's voice stayed with him. Don't fight the wind. And he was learning, letting it blow, watching it pass, holding his light instead. One morning, he found an old photo, him and his ex-wife, smiling, years ago. The ache came, sharp at first, then softened as he breathed. In, out. May I be free, may I find peace. He didn't rip it up, didn't cling either, just set it down, a memory, not a chain. The Buddha said, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. John felt that, not all at once, but in pieces, like raindrops drying on a window. He started walking more, not to escape, but to see. The city unfolded differently now, a bodega cat stretching in the sun, a street musician's slow tune, kids racing past with kites. He'd pause, breathe, let it sink in, no rush, no fight. Mindfulness isn't complicated, the monk had said. It's just this, being here. John was here, not perfect, not fixed, but here, and it was starting to feel like enough. Let's try that together. Next time you're out, notice one thing, the crunch of leaves, the warmth of your coat. Don't judge it, don't fix it, just see it, feel it, let it be. Zenteachings call this beginner's mind, seeing the world fresh, like a child, no baggage, no hurry. John was no child, but he was shedding layers, old stories, old weights, one breath at a time. One day, he saw a help-wanted sign at a bookstore, faded but clear. He hesitated, then walked in, the bell jingling softly. The owner, an older woman with sharp eyes, asked, "You read much?" John nodded. "Enough." She handed him a stack of books. "Start tomorrow." It wasn't his old career, not even close, but it felt right, simple, steady. He shelved books that first day, dust in the air, and thought, this is mine, this moment, this quiet. At the temple that night, he told the monk, "I got a job." The monk smiled, pouring tea. "Good, but the real work's still here," tapping his chest. John laughed. "Yeah, I know." They sat in silence, steam rising from their cups, the lantern outside swaying gently. "There's a Buddhist prayer," the monk said. "May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe." John repeated it, feeling it ripple outward, not just for him, but for Sarah, the bookstore lady, even his ex. Think about that, wishing peace for others, not because they deserve it, but because it frees you too. John wasn't saintly, far from it. He still grumbled at late trains, still woke up heavy some days. But that prayer, that breath, it shifted something, made the load lighter. The Buddha taught, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. And John was letting go, not all at once, but enough to feel the difference. One evening, he shelved a book on meditation, flipping through it, curious. It said, "Sit, breathe, watch your thoughts like clouds, don't chase them, don't fight them." He tried it that night, legs crossed on his couch, 5 minutes stretching to 10. Thoughts came, bills, memories, worries, but he watched them drift, not gripping, not sinking. "That's your lantern," the monk's voice whispered in his mind. "Steady, no matter what passes." Have you ever sat like that, just watching? It's not about emptying your mind. It's about letting it be, messy, loud, human. John did, night after night, and the storms didn't stop, but they didn't rule him. He wrote in his journal, "The wind howled, I stayed still, and it felt like truth." The city kept spinning, but he found a center, small, fragile, but his. This isn't about perfection, it's about practice. One breath, one step, one day. The Zen master Suzuki said, "You are perfect as you are, and you can use a little improvement." And John smiled at that. Imperfect, improving, alive. He wasn't the man in the rain anymore. Not fully. He was John, holding a lantern, walking through. John's new rhythm grew roots, small but strong, like a plant breaking through concrete. The bookstore became his harbor, shelves of stories whispering calm, dust settling in the afternoon light. He'd run his fingers over the spines, breathing steady, feeling the weight of each day lift just a little. May I be free, may I find peace, he'd whisper, not loud, just to himself, a quiet thread tying him to the moment. The storm still lingered, but it was background noise now, not the whole song. One day, a customer lingered, an older man with tired eyes, browsing the philosophy section. John shelved a book nearby, catching his sigh. "Rough day?" John asked, surprising himself. The man nodded. "Lost my wife last year, still figuring it out." John paused, then said, "I get that, lost a lot too." They stood there, two strangers, not fixing anything, just sharing the quiet. "You ever try breathing?" John added, half smiling. "Sounds dumb, but it helps." The man chuckled. "Maybe I will." He left with a book on mindfulness, and John felt something shift, not big, just a ripple. The Buddha said, "Thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and its life will not be shortened." John wasn't preaching, wasn't wise, but he'd shared a flicker, and it felt right, like passing a lantern through the dark. Let's think about that. How small acts ripple out, a kind word, a moment of listening. Zen teachings say, do not underestimate good, thinking it won't affect you. Drop by drop, the jar fills. John didn't see it then, but he was filling something, not just for himself, for others too. He wrote in his journal, "Talked to a guy today, didn't fix him, didn't need to." And it felt like growth. Back at the temple, he told the monk, "I think I helped someone." The monk nodded, stirring tea. "You're not just carrying the light, you're giving it." John sipped his cup, warm against his palms, and thought, maybe that's what this is, not hiding the glow, but letting it spill. "There's a Buddhist prayer," the monk said. "May all beings be free from suffering. May all know joy." John repeated it, feeling it stretch beyond the room, into the city's hum. One evening, Sarah dropped by the bookstore, her coat dusted with snow. "You're different," she said, scanning the shelves. "Calmer, I don't know." John shrugged. "Still a mess, just a quieter one." She laughed. "That's progress." They walked to the diner after, neon flickering, coffee steaming, talking about nothing and everything. He didn't need her to see the lantern, but she felt its warmth, and that was enough. Have you ever shared your light? Not grandly, just simply? A smile, a nod, a pause to hear someone out? The Buddha taught, in giving, you receive. And John was receiving, not in applause, but in connection, in being seen. He'd sit at work, watching people browse, and think, we're all carrying storms, all looking for a glow. Maybe I can help, just a little. One night, he meditated longer, 20 minutes, legs aching, breath deep. Thoughts drifted, the old job, the old fights, but he let them float, clouds on a wide sky. The mind is a guest house, the monk had said, quoting Rumi through a Buddhist lens. Welcome them all, but don't serve them tea. John smiled at that, welcoming, not hosting, letting the guests pass through. His lantern stayed lit, steady, warm. Try this with me. Next time someone's heavy, don't fix them, just sit, breathe, be there. John did that, day by day, and the bookstore became more than a job, a place where lanterns met, flickered, grew. He wrote, "A guy thanked me today, said I listened, that's all." And it hit him, listening was light too, soft, unforced, real. This isn't about saving the world, it's about lighting corners, yours, theirs, one breath at a time. The Zen master Dogen said, enlightenment is intimacy with all things, and John was intimate, with the shelves, the snow, the people, not perfect, but close. He wasn't lost anymore, not fully. He was John, sharing a lantern, steady in the storm. John's world grew softer edges, not smooth, not perfect, but gentler somehow. The bookstore hummed with its quiet life, pages turning, voices low, a refuge in the city's rush. He'd stand behind the counter, watching snow dust the windows, breathing slow, feeling the day settle around him. May all beings be free. He'd think, not just for him now, but for the tired faces browsing, the ones carrying storms he'd never know. His lantern wasn't bright, but it held, steady, warm. One afternoon, a young woman lingered, her hands tracing a book on grief. John noticed her pause, eyes distant, and asked, "Looking for something specific?" She hesitated, then said, "My brother's gone, 3 months now. I don't know how to keep going." John nodded. No quick fixes, just a shared silence. "I lost a lot too," he said. "Found this helped." Handing her a small card with the prayer, "May I be free, may I find peace." She took it, eyes soft. "Thanks, I'll try." She left with the book, and John felt that ripple again, small, unforced, a light passed on. The Buddha said, "A generous heart, kind speech, and a life of service are the things that renew humanity." And John wasn't renewing the world, just a corner, one breath, one card at a time. He wrote in his journal, "She didn't smile, but she looked lighter. Maybe that's enough." Let's pause there. Think about the lanterns we can share, not big gestures, just presence, a word, a moment. Zen teachings whisper, the best way to take care of the future is to take care of the present. And John was doing that, not planning, not preaching, just being. He shelved books, sipped tea, watched the snow, and thought, this is my practice, messy, real mine. One night at the temple, the monk asked, "What's changed?" John shrugged. "Not much, just me, I guess." The monk smiled. "That's everything." They sat, the lantern outside swaying, its glow cutting through the dark. "There's a Buddhist prayer," the monk said. "May I dwell in the heart, may I be healed." John repeated it, feeling it sink deep. Not just words, but a wish, a tether to something bigger. Sarah came by again, her laughter filling the bookstore. "You're turning into a monk." John grinned. "Nah, just a guy with a candle." She stayed, helping him close up, their banter light, easy. "You're good at this," she said, locking the door, "being you." He didn't argue, just felt it, the truth of it, not grand, but solid. The city spun on, but he had this, friends, work, a lantern glowing steady. Have you ever felt that, a quiet good, not loud, not flashy, just there? The Buddha taught, contentment is the greatest wealth. And John was wealthy, not in cash, not in fame, but in moments, small, stacked, real. He'd sit by the river some nights, snow crunching underfoot, and think, I'm here, not lost, not running here. The storm still blew, but it didn't shake him loose. One day, the bookstore owner watched him, her sharp eyes softer now. "You're different," she said, steadier. John nodded. "Took a while." She handed him a key. "Lock up sometimes, I trust you." It wasn't a promotion, just a nod, but it landed deep, trust, a light shared back. He wrote, "She trusts me. I trust me too. Weird how that works. Try this with me. Next time the wind howls, don't brace, don't hide. Just stand, breathe, feel it pass." John did, day after day, and the bookstore became a temple too, not with incense, but with presence, with people meeting in the quiet. He meditated more, 15 minutes, 20, watching thoughts drift, letting them go, his lantern burning brighter each time. This isn't about endings, it's about middles, living in them, lighting them. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh said, "There is no way to happiness, happiness is the way." And John was walking it, not fast, not far, but true. He wasn't the man in the rain, not anymore. He was John, steady, sharing, alive in the storm. John stood at the bookstore counter, snow falling outside, a soft blanket over the city's sharp edges. Months had passed since that rainy night, since the temple, the monk, the lantern swaying in the storm. He wasn't a new man, not reborn, not flawless, but he was steady, a light flickering through the gray. The journal lay open beside him, pages filled with small truths. The wind blew today, I let it. And he smiled, knowing this was his path, not loud, not grand, but his. The storm still came, late bills, quiet nights, memories that stung, but they didn't uproot him anymore. He'd breathe. May I be free, may I find peace, and feel the ground hold him, solid, real. The Buddha said, "The root of suffering is attachment," and John had let go, not everything, not perfectly, but enough to walk lighter. The bookstore, the temple, Sarah's laugh, they were lanterns too, glowing beside his own, warming the cold corners of his days. One evening, he closed up shop, the key heavy in his hand, a trust earned, a life rebuilt, piece by piece. He walked home, snow crunching underfoot, the city alive around him, and thought, this is it, not an end, not a fix, but a middle, a moment. The monk's voice lingered, "You're not the storm, you're the one holding the light." And John held it, not tight, not forced, just there, steady in the wind. Let's sit with that, all of us, wherever you are, whatever your storm. You don't need to outrun it, don't need to fight it, just hold your lantern, breathe, be. Zenteachings tell us, the miracle is not to walk on water, but to walk on the earth. And John was walking, not fast, not far, but present, alive. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous, but he was here, and that was the lesson. Peace isn't out there, it's in you, flickering, waiting. What's your lantern? What keeps you steady when the wind picks up? Maybe it's a prayer, a walk, a quiet cup of tea, or just sitting still, feeling your breath. John found his in a temple, a bookstore, a friend, and you can too, wherever you stand. The Buddha taught, you are your own refuge, and John was, not perfect, not done, but enough. So, what will you light today? What will you carry through your storm? This isn't about big wins, it's about small steps, breaths, moments stacked into something real. John's story isn't over, it's ongoing, like yours, like mine, a thread of light weaving through the dark. He'd sit by the river some nights, snow falling, and think, I'm okay, not great, but okay, and that was victory, quiet, hard-won true. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh said, peace in every step. And John took those steps, one by one, lantern in hand. Now, here's where you come in, gently, easily, no rush. If this story touched you, if it lit something small, why not try it today? Take 5 minutes, sit, breathe, feel the ground beneath you, whisper, may I be free, and see what shifts. Share that light if you can, not loud, not forced, just a ripple, a kind word, a pause for someone else. The world's stormy, sure, but lanterns spread, drop by drop, heart by heart. If you're still here, still listening, thank you, truly. This is Calmheal, a space for peace, for you, for all of us. If it helped, if it steadied you, maybe share it with someone. Let the glow reach further. Or drop a thought below. What's your lantern? What keeps you lit? Try that 5-minute breath today. Feel it. Tell us how it goes. And if you want more stories, more calm, stick with Calmheal. We're here, walking with you, one light at a time. John's not done, neither are we. So let's keep going, together, soft and steady. Take that breath now, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel it, hold it, live it. That's your lantern, right there, glowing, alive, yours.